What's up, guys? So I know I haven't done a video in a long time. It's been a while. I've been pretty busy with a lot of stuff, school, work, and working on this bad boy. Why? Well, because it had a rod knock, unfortunately. While I was driving out of nowhere, the car just stalled while I was on the freeway, and I was wondering why. So the next day I went to go check it out, went to work on it, and I kept hearing this little noise, kind of like a little knock sound, like that, and it got louder the more I left the car on. So I went under the car, turned it on again, or had my friend turn on the car so I can hear the sound, and did a little bit of research, and it happened to be that a lot of people have this problem with Subarus, that they have rod knocks. So what I'm going to be doing is separate videos of me rebuilding the engine. So this one is going to be me removing the engine from the car, and you'll see on my next videos that I have, but I got a lot of material for you guys, so enjoy. First we'll start by removing the 5 bolts connected to the turbo with a 14mm socket. Then we'll move on to the intercooler, removing the bolts connected to it with a 12mm socket. Then we'll go ahead and remove each hose and each clamp connected to the intercooler. Now once the hose and clamps are loosened, we can go ahead and remove the intercooler. And there you have it. Intercooler's off. This one we're going to junk because we're going to put a new intercooler into it that's way bigger and made completely out of metal, not plastic. Now with the intercooler removed, we'll go ahead and put rags into the open areas so nothing enters into it. Now we're going to remove the oil line and be careful with the 2 copper O-rings. Now remove the coolant hoses and be sure to plug them after so no coolant comes pouring out. Now we'll go ahead and go under the car to remove the downpipe. Be sure to be safe and put 2 jack stands underneath the frame for safety. Okay, there you go. Now before taking down the downpipe completely, you're going to remove the sensor connected to the oxygen sensor. You're going to just the sensor itself, not the whole oxygen sensor. It'll make it much easier than taking that out. That way you can just move down the downpipe, take it off of the turbo, so you won't damage the cable itself. Then you're able to pull it out and move on to taking out the turbo after that. Now we'll be removing those 3 bolts from the turbo. There'll be 3 on the top, or there'll be 3 on the bottom of the turbo. You'll need an extension to reach them. One's going to take a 1/2 inch. You usually take it out 14mm. The other one you're going to need probably a 3/8 and a skinnier extension to get into, which is the top right one. Once you get all those nuts out, you'll be able to take out the turbo. After you take out the clamp connected to the turbo inlet, you kind of have to play with it. Don't forget to remove the exhaust gasket that's connected to the downpipe. And also, when you put back the turbo and put back all the exhaust, you're going to want to get some new gaskets because it'll probably leak because these gaskets are one-time use. Once you take the turbo out, you're going to want to check and inspect the turbo. You want to see if there's a lot of play in this turbo spool. If there is, you'll probably need a new turbo. If not, it's still usable. And also you're going to want to change that bottom coolant hose to a longer one it'll be a lot easier to put back in. Move on to the air intake, removing the protection cover first. Now we'll remove the plastic air vent. Make sure to remove the airflow sensor and move it to the side so it doesn't get damaged. And remove the air intake box that came with the Cobb air intake kit. Now remove the clamp that goes behind the air intake hose so you can take out the whole air intake itself. Make sure again to put a rag wherever there's an open area. This is optional, but I'm going to go ahead and clean the air filter with the air filter cleaner spray. Then after the air cleaner, you're going to go ahead and pour down with water to take out all the dirt that's inside of it. By the way, it's better to use a hose or something because I ran out of water pretty quick with the bottle. Once you've taken out all the dirt, put it to the side and let it dry. I'll move on to the battery now, taking out the terminals and the battery hold down. Once the battery is removed, I'll move on to the blower motor, taking out the cap. After the cap is off, there'll be 3 bolts that you need to remove to take out the blower motor itself. Once the bolts are off, you go ahead and take out the hose connected to the blower motor and the sensor that's connected to it on the bottom left. Now we'll go ahead by loosening the tensioner and removing the bolt to the tensioner to be able to take off the belt. Now we'll take off the alternator belt completely by first pushing down all the alternator. It's a little hard to take off, so you might want to push down a little more. Then be able to take it off completely. You can check the belt for any damages. For me, I like to just change the belt completely. But just make sure that there's no damage in the belt. You can put it back on. Before moving on, we'll go ahead and drain the coolant first out of the radiator. Then you'll be able to remove the top hose from the radiator. And go to the bottom and take off the clamp on the bottom hose until the fluid drains completely. Now we'll move off the other coolant reservoir on top where the intake is, taking off the hoses and also taking off the cap of the radiator to let the fluid flow faster. You'll be able to completely take off the reservoir itself and snap it off, move it to the side. We'll take out the bolt to the wiring harness that connects to the alternator. Once you are able to take off the sensor connected to the alternator, we'll move that off to the side. Getting ready to take out the wiring harness. There'll be 2 tabs, one on the left next to the AC compressor. We'll also take off the sensor connected to the AC compressor. Then there'll be one more tab on the right next to where the blower motor was. Take off that tab using a plier. Then you'll be able to move off the wiring harness to the side. Blower motor off, there will be 2 bolts that connect to the bottom of the blower motor to take out that blower motor bracket. Now we'll remove the bolt connected to the alternator. Now we'll remove the power steering itself by removing the 2 bolts in back of the pulley. Then we'll remove the top wire connected to the power steering itself. Now remove the 2 bottom bolts on the power steering. You probably need to use a flexible joint socket in order to take these out. After taking out those 2 bolts, you'll be able to take out the power steering and move it to the side. And then you will be able to remove the alternator completely. There goes the alternator. Then we'll be able to remove the 3 bolts connected to the AC compressor to be able to also move the AC compressor to the side. Now we'll remove the fuel lines, but first you'll need to take out the 15 amp fuse so that you can go into the vehicle, turn it 3 times to make sure that the fuel does not go through the system anymore. Here I had my dad help me to make these 2 copper wires because the line disconnect tool would not fit in, so he used them to sneak in between the lines to take out the lines completely and show you exactly where on the tabs he was able to take out to remove it from the line. Then we move these wires to the side facing upwards to make sure no fuel comes pouring out. Those 2 lines out, you only have the middle one which only has a clamp on it. Remove the clamp. It was pretty hard to take out, so I ended up using bent needle nose pliers in order to take out the hose completely and safely, even though it was stuck to the line. There you go. Last but not least. Now after it's been long enough, all the coolant has drained out. You're able to take out the hose in the bottom of the radiator. And before removing the radiator, you'll find a sensor to the left and to the bottom right of the radiator. Remove those and move them out of the way. Now you'll be able to take out the 2 bolts connected to the top of the radiator. Once those bolts are off, you'll be able to remove the radiator completely, pop it up, and take it out. Now you can remove the ECU harness connected to the air intake. It's not needed, it's only optional, as you do not need to take it out in order to take out the engine. It's also optional, but I'm going to take out the bolt connected to the turbo inlet and the hoses it's connected to, because I'm going to change it for a performance one. After After taking out all the wires connected to the engine, you're going to take the last one, which is the ECU harness. Make sure you take that out. You cannot take the engine out without removing that. But of course, before removing the engine, you're going to need to take out the motor mounts. So there's two nuts on the bottom, the one on the right, one on the left. They both have washers. So once you take out those nuts, don't forget the washers. They'll be able to take out or remove the engine. Now we will remove the hood lifts, but first put a hood prop on it. When removing the lift supports, don't forget these red tabs that are on the bolts. Make sure you keep them with it. Now moving the hood up with the hood prop, you'll be able to take off all the lift arms. With the cherry picker, the engine is ready to be moved. There's two locations, one here and one here, both bolted on with the chain securely to the engine. Now we'll move the engine up to make sure that it's all supported on the engine itself. There are 7 bolts to the bell housing, as you can see in this picture. 4 on the bottom and 3 on top, 2 connected to the starter. Those bolts are removed. You're probably going to need a plier and a crowbar. It took me a couple of minutes to get the transmission away from the engine. Sorry about it being dark, guys, but it took me a while to finally remove the engine completely, and now I'm able to take it out and remove the engine from the car. Well, there you have it. So as you can see in my next video, I have the engine down and tearing it apart. Please like and subscribe, and thanks for watching, everyone.